Hi there, Stephanie LaFaro here. I am back to discuss Chapter 2 of John Dewey's book, Experience in Education. I do apologize, I'm in my Colorado Rapids, lovely t-shirt here. I'm about to watch them play. That's Major League Soccer, if you're not familiar with the Rapids. And actually, in my last video, I realized as I was kind of rewatching it that I was also wearing a Colorado Rapids sweatshirt in that video. I promise you I do wear some normal clothes, but not when the Rapids are in season. I will always be in my gear. So Chapter 2 of John Dewey Experience in Education, John Dewey talks about the need of a theory of an experience, or of experience, pardon me. And he begins by kind of mentioning that just by rejecting traditional schools of thought and traditional education, it leaves you in no better place than just having turned your back on a theory. And so you need to kind of come in with a well-developed alternative if you're going to say, no, I don't like something, or I don't agree. What's the alternative? Where do you go from there? However, new education, or the new kind of schools of thought, they come with problems in themselves, and John Dewey in this chapter kind of attempts to solve some of them. Again, it is kind of a quick read. I hope you do read it for yourself as well, and don't rely on my thoughts and reflections about it. And John Dewey begins by talking about the differences between experiment and experience. And immediately I thought of an experiment as, you know, you're in your science lab and you're experimenting with different chemicals to make something go bang. That's kind of what I thought of initially. And really, it's anything where you have a theory and you want to test out your theory to find out if something that you theorized is correct or not. An experience, however, can be anything that you see or you do, or you can have an emotional experience. Those are all kind of covered underneath the experiences that he's talking about. However, it's really important to note that not all experiences are genuinely educational, and he does mention that in this chapter. And think about kind of what he said in chapter 1, how a misguided experience can really kind of taint your experience, and it can also be miseducational. You could be completely misguided after that experience. And I think it goes against human nature to want to repeat a bad experience as well. So that's really important to note. I love what he said here, kind of later on in the chapter. He mentions that you can also have experiences in a traditional educational setting. So traditional education doesn't mean that you're not having experiences. And I also mentioned in the first video that traditional education also doesn't just mean someone writing notes on the board and you're copying it word for word like they did in ancient times. There is experiences that you can have in the classroom in traditional education. I kind of inferred from this part too that progressive education kind of depends on quality experiences. And I almost wanted to one-up John Dewey. It's not really possible to one-up him, but I'm going to try here. And so I also wanted to pull in problem-based learning and mention that problem-based learning is so important in progressive education because problem-based learning teaches learners a methodology in solving problems. And that is how problem-based learning and experiences kind of are married here. I think that if you're teaching your learners a methodology on solving problems via an experience, that is something that kind of influences your future experiences, and then you can go into your second educational experience kind of armed with all these tools that you've learned from your first experience. So yes, he does mention the quality of an experience is highly important, and he mentions two things about the quality of an experience. He says, first of all, the agreeableness of the experience, and I took that as something that you either like or don't like, or you kind of are predisposed to enjoy. And then he also mentions number 2, the influence upon further experiences, and kind of tying that back to problem-based learning, which is why I mentioned that, is that if you have an experience, you're going to learn and grow from it, and then your next experience, you're going to have better tools to go into that experience. And oh gosh, this is going to be a shorter video, so I do apologize because it was also, again, kind of a quick read here. But going back to the need of a theory of experience here, Dewey kind of goes back to traditional education and says that it kind of doesn't rely on a specific philosophy. I don't know how much I agree or disagree with that yet, so I kind of invite you to think about that. So traditional education doesn't necessarily need a specific philosophy because it kind of relies on culture, the discipline, and history. And progressive education doesn't really rely on those things. It kind of just evolves with the time. However, he also mentions that progressive education isn't entirely improvised. It's not just kind of made up as we go along. Again, that's kind of why we need a strong theory of experience. So, ending the chapter here, he does mention going back to this need for the theory of experience. And like I said, history kind of is tied into traditional education. It's kind of the foundation. History kind of justifies our current processes. A historical experience in our past justifies our present behavior, and that's what I do firmly believe, that we are kind of products of our environment and our upbringing. However, progressive schools of thought don't have that luxury. They don't have that kind of historical foundation to lean on, like traditional education does. And so this is kind of why we need to build up a strong foundation, why we need this theory of experience, and why we need to give progressive education a direction. And by doing so, however, kind of left this chapter thinking that if we do kind of give this progressive thought, strong foundation, does that mean that it will kind of slowly become traditional? Will progressive education become our new traditional education? Food for thought. Thanks for listening. All right, I'll see you next time.